What if Japan had not attacked Pearl Harbor? Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into a massive what if in history. December 7th, 1941, the attack on Pearl Harbor was a game changer. It pulled the United States into World War II, shifting the global balance of power. But what if Japan had decided to play it differently and not attacked the US? Let's take a trip down this alternate timeline and see how things could have played out. America stays on the sidelines. Without the attack on Pearl Harbor, the US likely stays out of the war for much longer. At the time, the public wasn't eager to jump into another global conflict, and isolationism was very much the dominant sentiment. The American government was also preoccupied with recovering from the Great Depression. So, what happens next? Europe. Germany would get more time to strengthen its hold over the continent. With no US intervention, Hitler can direct his full attention to the Soviet Union. The Wehrmacht would likely experience fewer setbacks, as there wouldn't be the immediate pressure of an American invasion on the Western Front. The Battle of Stalingrad, one of the pivotal moments in World War II, could have gone differently, and the Nazis might have been able to push the Soviets back even further. North Africa. With the US out of the picture, Britain's struggle in North Africa against Rommel could be more challenging, and the Axis might strengthen its grip on the Mediterranean. That could delay any major Allied push to liberate Europe. Asia. Japan continues its march across the Pacific, and with no immediate military response from the US, it would likely expand even faster. The American focus would remain on its own territories and trade, especially after the devastation of the Great Depression. The US would likely have continued its policy of aiding China and the Allies, but without full military involvement. Without the US standing in its way, Japan could have seen a swift and unchecked expansion across Asia. This could dramatically shift the entire balance of power in the Pacific. China's full conquest. Japan, already heavily involved in China, might have fully conquered the country without US support for Chiang Kai-shek's nationalist forces. The US would have likely continued to provide aid, but without direct military support, the Chinese resistance could weaken significantly. A fully Japanese-controlled China would make the Empire of Japan the largest power in Asia. The question is whether Japan could hold China long-term, considering its size and internal resistance. Australia under threat. Japan, with control over Southeast Asia and the Pacific, would turn its attention to Australia. Without the US as a potential ally, Australia could be forced to negotiate with Japan or face the prospect of an invasion. The US might still try to send support, but without a solid military presence in the Pacific, it would be difficult to push back the Japanese forces. The idea of a Japanese-controlled Pacific would drastically shift global geopolitics. A vast resource empire. By taking control of key Southeast Asian nations, Japan would now control vast quantities of valuable resources like oil from Indonesia and rubber from Malaya. These resources would fuel Japan's war machine, allowing it to become an even greater military and industrial power. This might even lead to Japan developing a more powerful navy and air force, able to challenge US interests in the Pacific. Let's talk about the European front. Without the US coming to the aid of Britain and the Soviet Union, Germany has the chance to fortify its position and push even deeper into Eastern Europe. A stronger Eastern front. The US delay gives the Nazis more time to complete their conquest of the Soviet Union. The massive size of the USSR has always been a problem for the Germans, but with more time to reinforce their lines, the Nazis could potentially achieve their goal of conquering Moscow and St. Petersburg. The Soviets would face a much harder time resisting, as the US and its material support would not be present. This might even lead to the Soviets having to negotiate with Germany, which could fundamentally alter the balance of power in Europe. Technology advancements. Without the constant strain of having to prepare for a potential US invasion, Germany would have more resources to focus on technological advancements. This means they could have ramped up production of advanced aircraft, tanks, and even rockets. Imagine a scenario where Germany develops nuclear weapons before the Allies, or achieves further success with its jet fighter programs, putting them ahead in the technology race. The longer Germany has the upper hand in technological warfare, the more difficult it becomes for the Allies to catch up. An even stronger Navy and Air Force. With no immediate threat from the US, Germany could devote more resources to naval and air power, making it a far more formidable opponent in both the Atlantic and the Mediterranean. This could delay or even prevent any Allied landings in Europe, making the war much longer and harder for the Allies to win. Japan's control over the Pacific and Southeast Asia solidified, the US might face a much stronger and more organized enemy when they enter the Pacific theater. The Japanese Navy and Air Force would be much more powerful, making island-hopping campaigns and naval battles much more costly for the US. Every step forward in the Pacific would be harder, more bloody, and more expensive. Germany's overconfidence. Similarly, Germany's focus on the Soviet Union could cause them to overextend themselves. The vastness of Russia and the harsh conditions of the Eastern Front could eventually lead to German exhaustion. Their technological advances might give them an edge, but their empire would eventually weaken under the strain of war. The longer they fight, the more likely it becomes that internal issues, like resource shortages, military fatigue, and morale problems, could contribute to their downfall. So, what do you think? Could Japan and Germany have pulled off a victory, or was it just a matter of